What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. Previously, I did top 10 movies that I want on Blu-ray in North America, and after doing that video, I was like, you know what? Why not do top 10 movies that I want on 4K UHD in North America? So here we are. I'm doing just that. Top 10 movies that I want on 4K UHD in North America. And what's great is this time around, I am joined with Larry, aka Chillyboy. He is a fellow YouTube critic that I've worked with numerous times in the past. It has been a couple years since we've last collaborated, unfortunately, but we've collaborated on videos on his channel as well as on mine. So I'm glad that we're collaborating on something that we both love, such as physical media. So as you will see in his section of this video, the way this will be structured, though, is simple. He will be giving his honorable mentions. I will give my honorable mentions. He will give his 10 to 6. I'll give my 10 to 6. And then he'll give his 5 to 1. And I'll give my 5 to 1. And then we'll wrap things up. And as always, keep in mind, this is going to be a clearly subjective video. Yours is definitely going to be different than mine, and that's what's great about film as an art form. It is quite subjective. So let me know the top 10 movies that you want to see on 4K UHD in the comment section down below. This is, again, a physical media video, and let's face it, us physical media collectors, we need to stick together. So I'm looking forward to seeing your list in the comment section down below. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. Larry, take it away.
Thank you so much, Chad, for inviting me on to discuss films I'd like to see get a 4K release here in the USA. So you can only see a little tidbit here behind me over here, but I am a big proponent of physical media. I love buying Blu-rays, DVDs, and 4Ks. However, it's been a pretty recent development that I've paid attention more to the actual aspects of the release. For so long, I just kind of bought movies, regardless of the format. So I still have a lot of DVDs, because I also never get rid of anything until I replace it. So there were a few that I wasn't really sure of that seemed like they kind of have releases, or have releases right on the cusp, or about to be released. So I didn't include those in my list. Otherwise, here are my 5 honorable mentions to kick things off. Also, I'll be doing my best Chad impersonation here, showing off my version that I have on physical media now while discussing it. So kicking us off, I have The Aviator, which, yep, I just have on DVD right now. It's a beautiful film that I'm actually shocked doesn't have a 4K restoration to this point, but I would love to see this one get one. In this spot, I'm just going to put most all of Quentin Tarantino's filmography. Particularly, I'd like to see something like Django Unchained, but what's going on? We don't have almost any of these suckers on 4K. In that same vein, I'll use Spirited Away as the bookmark here. We'll revisit a different Ghibli film on my actual list. However, they just did these steelbook releases, and none of them were in 4K. So we literally have one Studio Ghibli film that has a 4K release to this point. Can we get the others? I know a lot of people don't love this film, however, I really enjoy it and think it's actually beautiful and could benefit from a 4K release, and that is Interview with the Vampire. Now, it's nowhere near as good as the series that AMC is currently running, but I think it's time to upgrade it. And finally, this is just the pure stan in me. I need an upgrade for Crossroads. Honestly, I'll take a Blu-ray. I'll take any kind of upgrade for this. I'm a huge Britney Spears stan, so can I get Crossroads, please?
I apologize. In my intro, I didn't let you guys know, but I have a mild cold right now, but I still wanted to get this video out to you guys ASAP because it's one that, again, I'm very excited to deliver to you guys, but it was very difficult to do at the same time. Not because I have a mild cold, but because there were just so many movies that I want to see on 4K UHD in North America. So many so that at one point I had like 10, 11 honorable mentions. So, of course, I'm not going to give you guys 10 to 11 honorable mentions. What I'm instead going to do is I decided to cut that in half. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliver to you guys another top 10 movies that I want on 4K UHD North America, or give you guys top 10 movies I want on 4K UHD North America Part 2. We'll see whichever order. But for this video, I condensed it down to 5 honorable mentions. So I'll be going from the one that was furthest from making my top 10 to the one that was on the cusp of making my top 10. And also, the specs that I'm delivering to you guys, keep in mind I am going based off of IMDb, so I wanted to let you guys know that. And again, I am filming this video Wednesday, August 28th of 2024, so keep that in mind in case you are watching this video in the future, and potentially some of these movies have 4K UHD releases in North America now. So that being said, let's get started with honorable mentions. So to kick things off, we have Planet of the Apes, 1968. This was shot on 35mm, and this is the film that kicked off the Planet of the Apes franchise, which to this day is still going on. The Andy Serkis trilogy has 4K releases. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the most recent entry, has a 4K release. So why doesn't this one have it? Especially considering that not only did it start this franchise, but it also is highly regarded in pop culture, and also it has one of the best twist endings of all time. I suspect the reason is because of the merger between 20th Century Fox and Disney. Disney isn't really well known for, being pro-physical media, so I suspect that that's the reason. They don't really have an excuse to give a 4K release. I do suspect, though, that we might have a 4K release of this, for the 60th anniversary of Planet of the Apes. So we'll see if that happens. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping it does, which is why I have it on this list. Next entry, we have Naked Lunch. This is a 1991 film directed by David Cronenberg. I am a huge David Cronenberg fan. I've actually ranked his filmography on my director playlist that you guys can check out down below. But I like David Cronenberg. I think he's a really good director. This is definitely one of my favorite of his work. I own a bunch of his films on Criterion Blu-ray, and all of them I'm very happy with the presentation. And I was close to buying Naked Lunch on Criterion Blu-ray, but what held me back was I saw on IMDb that it's shot on 35mm, and that 2023 there was a 4K scan for this. So I suspect that within the next year or so, we will get a 4K release of Naked Lunch. Whether that's Criterion or Kino Lore or some other boutique label, that's, hasn't been said just yet. But again, I really do believe, I have a gut feeling that within the next year, we will get a 4K release for this on physical media. So that's why it's an honorable mention. Next up, we have another David Cronenberg film, and that is The Fly, 1986. This was shot on 35mm, and from what I saw, there isn't a 4K scan for this, so I don't know if we'll get this anytime soon, but I am hoping that we do, because when I look at the reviews for the Blu-ray, a lot of people say that the Blu-ray is kind of like, so it's one of those films that, again, it's one of the most popular of the 1980s, so it's like, we should have a transfer that looks great. I know it's a film that is very drab looking to begin with, but I really do think that HDR would still enhance it, especially with how there's so much usage of shadows with this film. So I think it would be very beneficial. And that's why I've been holding out on buying this on Blu-ray. So I'm hoping that we get a 4K release for this down the line. And that's why it's an honorable mention. Next honorable mention, we have a film that I saw recently. And that is Bad Education. This is a 2004 film directed by, and I apologize if I butcher his name, Pedro Almodovar. I watched this film for Pride Month, and I have to say, this was a great way to end Pride Month, because this film is fantastic. However, when the film ended, I watched it on HBO Max, or I guess it's called Max, and I looked it up afterwards, and apparently the cut I watched, and I didn't realize this at the time, it was the R-rated cut and not the NC-17 cut. So I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I went on Blu-ray.com and I went to see if there was a Blu-ray release or 4K. There wasn't any Blu-ray or 4K release for this film. So I'm like, what the heck? So I'm really hoping that we get a 4K release for this film. I mean, it is shot on 35mm, and I know it's not too well known, but I'm hoping that we get a 4K release. Although, to be fair, even if it were to just get a Blu-ray release and actually included, the NC-17 cut, which is what the director's vision was, I would be very, very happy. But I'm really, fingers crossed, hoping for a 4K release, because Pedro Almodovar's films are beautiful looking, and I really do think that something like HDR would really make this film pop on the screen even more. So I love this film. I think that you should definitely watch it. But again, a physical media release for this on 4K would be amazing. So check this 2004 film out. That's why I have it as an honorable mention. And the last honorable mention, this was, again, so close to make my top 10. We have Killers of the Flower Moon. This is a 2023 film. It is shot on 35mm, and it does have a 4K master format. So this is one of those films that The fact that it doesn't have a physical media release lies in the fact that Apple TV Plus owns pretty much the rights to it. So they aren't really known for physical media, of course, because they're a streaming service. So I'm really, fingers crossed, hoping that they work hand in hand with something like Criterion to deliver a 4K release for this film, because I saw this in theaters and it looked spectacular. I can only imagine what a 4K release for this film would look like. And the fact that it got a bunch of Oscar nominations and did decent at the box office tells me that there's a pretty good chance that this actually does get a 4K release down the line. And I'm really, really hoping so. And yeah, that's why I have it as an honorable mention. But yeah, those are my 5 honorable mentions. Larry, kick it away with your 10 to 6.
So kicking off my top 10, I tried to keep this as an authentic list of films I love, I adore, I want to see get that upgrade for whatever reason. And that starts off with maybe an off-the-wall choice, My Week with Marilyn. I actually really, really love this film. As a huge Marilyn Monroe fan, I thought they did a pretty wonderful job in this film. Much better than that Ana de Armas monstrosity blonde, that's for sure. But just from a cinematography, from a visual standpoint, this is a beautiful film that I think would do great in the 4K format. I know I currently just have it in DVD and there is a Blu-ray out, but I'm waiting and hoping maybe one day we can get the upgrade. Our number 9 is a film I actually don't own at all currently, and it's Death Becomes Her, the Meryl Streep Goldie Hawn classic that I adore. I know so many others adore. I think it looks good enough that we could get a 4K restoration for that one, and the gays will certainly be eating it up. At number 8, I have Beasts of the Southern Wild. This little indie Oscar nominee definitely deserves a 4K restoration. This is a beautiful, whimsical film that has so much fantastical elements to its storytelling. I know it's not this big budget CG fest, but it is a stunning film to just view. I think it would greatly benefit from an upgrade to 4K, and I would just like to see this film in general kind of get a resurgence to get a little bit more of the love it deserves. At number 7, I have Breakfast at Tiffany's, another absolutely stunning film. The cinematography in this is already gorgeous. And honestly, like, this is a classic. What are we doing? So many of these classics are finally getting some sort of upgrade and not like, the George Lucas style upgrade where we're tinkering with things. Steven Spielberg was tinkering as well when he's upgrading his films. No, 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 no. Leave them as they are. Problematic aspects and all. But Audrey Hepburn's filmography largely is missing in the 4K collections. And what better way to launch Hepburn into the 4K restoration than with one of her biggest classics to date, Breakfast at Tiffany's. At number 6, I have the Todd Haynes film, Carol. Talk about an absolutely gorgeous film that would benefit greatly from a 4K restoration. Once again, it does have a Blu-ray, and I just have it here on DVD. I know, a huge, huge sin. But come on, this is a beloved film at this point from a beloved director with Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara starring. It's an Oscar nominee, and it's already gorgeous. Just imagine getting to see it in that crisp 4K format at home.
So kicking off my top 10, we have my number 10, which is AI, Artificial Intelligence. This is a film directed by Steven Spielberg that came out in 2001, and it is shot on 35mm. As far as I could tell, there isn't a 4K scan of this. There is a Blu-ray release for this, but I really do believe that at some point we will get a 4K release for this film, especially because it's a Spielberg film. Many of his films have actually gotten 4K releases, so I think that with how this film did a decent job at the box office and how there is some love with this film. Don't get me wrong, there are some people that really don't like this film, especially with how the third act plays out. I do think that there are quite a bit of fans for this film, so I think that at some point we will get a 4K release for this for this film, and that's why I am kind of holding out, because again, I quite like this film, but I haven't picked up the Blu-ray because in the back of my mind I'm like, I think this will get a 4K release, so that's why it was my number 10. Next up, my number 9, we have Michael Clayton. This is a 2007 film, and this got a a bunch of Oscar nominations, and even a win for Best Supporting Actress, Tilda Swinton. So it's one of those films where it is beloved when it came out, and it did decent at the box office. So why doesn't this have a 4K release? Well, upon looking it up, this was shot on 35 millimeter, but the 2K master is all that there is. So there isn't a 4K scan of this film. So it's one of those films that if it were to get a 4K release, they would have to go back and they would have to do a 4K scan of this. Will that happen? I don't know. It is Warner Brothers, so that's a flip of the coin. And ask the gods to decide if that will occur. But the Blu-ray, from what I understand, isn't that good, like, at all. I've seen the review on Blu-ray.com, and I'm like, oh. Because this is one of those films that I really like. I've seen it twice now, and both times I got the DVD out of my local library. And I liked it, and I was like, oh, I'm sure that on Blu-ray it looks really good. But when I look it up, it's like, oh, it's really not that good, apparently. So, that being said, I think that this, of all films, because again, of all those things that I mentioned earlier, are why I think this should get a 4K release, especially because it's a really good film. Like, it's really, really good. And I think that, 15 plus years later, it's aged gracefully. So, highly recommend this film. And again, fingers crossed, hope this gets a 4K release. And yeah, that's my number 9. Next up, my number 8, we have another Steven Spielberg directed film, and that is my number 8, Amistad. This film came out in 1997. I first saw this film in history class, which was, I think it was 8th grade. Yeah, 8th grade. And I remember really liking it back then, and I actually rewatched it a couple years ago. And on rewatch, I was like, this is a great film. But it doesn't really get talked about that much, even though it got several Oscar nominations in 1997. But it does have a DVD and a Blu-ray release. And the Blu-ray I was tempted to buy. But again, similar to Artificial Intelligence, this is a film directed by Steven Spielberg. Like, it's one of those films that I feel like could get a actual 4K release down the line. Hasn't happened just yet, of course, but I have a gut feeling that it will, and that's why I've been holding out, from buying the Blu-ray. But don't get me wrong, there are some times where I've wanted to pull the trigger and buy the Blu-ray, but I'm holding out because I think that this film especially would look really, really good on 4K, especially with HDR, and that's why I have it as my number 8. Next up, my number 7. This is a very recent entry, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But my number 7, we have Challengers. Yeah, I know, Challengers, the film that came out several months ago. Look, this film did get a physical media release, but it was only DVD and Blu-ray. This film was shot on 35 millimeter, which I think I forgot to mention that Amistad was also shot on 35 millimeter. But the difference is that Challengers, it actually does have a 4K source format. So Warner Brothers does have the ability of actually delivering a 4K release. But they didn't. I think what they're doing, they do this sometimes every year, is that they release a film solely on Blu-ray, and then they want to see how well it plays out. Like, do people buy the Blu-ray? Does it, actually bode well with physical media collectors? Like, are so many people buying it that it's like, okay, we're going to then actually release a 4K release down the line. That happens. I've seen it before. It happened with Wrath of Man, like a year or two later, it got a 4K release. I think Challengers might get a 4K release in a year or two, because they're kind of testing the waters right now to see how well it plays out. And I'm hoping that's the case because, again, I'm holding out right now. Like, I haven't picked up the Blu-ray because it's such a bare bones release that it's like, this is a great looking film. I saw it twice in theaters, so I think 4K is the way to go, and that's why I'm hoping that this does get a 4K release. But yeah, Challengers, my number 7. Next up, my number 6. This is one I have been dying for. Like, for a long time. And there are so many times where I wanted to pull the trigger, but then I look at the review on Blu-ray.com and I'm like, nope. And my number 6, we have Eyes Wide Shut. This is a 1999 film. It is directed by Stanley Kubrick, shot on 35 millimeter. I am a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. But every time I go on Blu-ray.com and I see what the reviews are for the Blu-ray, I'm like, let me wait. I'm hoping that we get a 4K release for this film soon. Like, a lot of other Stanley Kubrick films have gotten a 4K release, or at the very least have had a 4K scan and then put on a Blu-ray. I'll take that at this point. But unfortunately, we're just stuck with the DVD and Blu-ray that, from what I understand, haven't aged well at all. In fact, when they came out, they weren't even like, hey, these are good. It was like, oh, no, these aren't good. So I think this film deserves a really good transfer. So I'm hoping that, they go back and they, scan it for 4K release. Again, fingers crossed. It turns 25 this year, so they have a really good reason to actually deliver a 4K release for this. So fingers crossed, and yeah, my number 6.
So kicking off my top 5, at number 5, I have The Conjuring, which is actually quite surprising to me. This is a huge blockbuster hit. It's made a ton of money and spawned countless sequels and spin-offs at this point. There's an entire Conjuring universe. And you're telling me that this film doesn't deserve a 4K restoration? It's actually quite mind-boggling. Now, I do at least have the Blu-ray for The Conjuring, but once more, James Wan brings so much to this film. It is a gorgeous-looking horror movie that deserves the upgrade. The popularity of the film and the franchise itself already warrants it, so I'm kind of shocked we're still stuck in Blu-ray land. At number 4, I have My Neighbor Totoro. Once again, this really could just be a spot for Studio Ghibli. I was stunned when they did this entire line of steelbooks. One by one, they released the entire Studio Ghibli catalog on steelbook, but only on Blu-ray. I was stunned by that decision. But this is my personal favorite Studio Ghibli film. My Neighbor Totoro, obviously the one that kind of kicked off Studio Ghibli, if you will. The official mascot of the studio. It's already stunning as is. Obviously, there are some others that maybe would benefit more, like Spirited Away that I showed, or Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, some of their newer films. But this is my favorite, so this is the one I'd like to see them start off with. And really, it's a crime that The Boy and the Heron was the first ever Studio Ghibli to get a 4K release. At number 3, I have Fight Club. Another one that I was actually a little bit stunned doesn't have a 4K release. Now, this is one I definitely need to just go ahead and upgrade. I'm shocked at myself that I don't have the steelbook because I'm a big steelbook guy in general. Those are kind of my jams. And I know Fight Club has a steelbook, but once again, this is such an ingrained film in pop culture. But looking at interviews, David Fincher's like, I don't like to watch that movie. I don't want to see it. So I doubt it's gonna be getting a 4K, maybe ever, but certainly not anytime soon, which is such a shame for all of us who love this movie. Seems this is gonna be one of those classics destined to stay in the realm of the Blu-ray. At number 2 is a film I don't own because I can't, and that is Nimona. The 2023 Netflix animated film was honestly one of my absolute favorite films of last year. I adored it. I sung its praises. I was screaming from the rooftops for everyone to watch it. But since it was Netflix and it's a streamer, we have no physical release. So honestly, yes, I need it in 4K resolution, please. Give me the 4K Ultra. That's what I want this film in. But can we at least get a Mitchell's vs. the Machines style physical release for Nimona? I am literally begging you. It was an Oscar nominee, just like Mitchell's vs. the Machines. It's beloved. It has a huge fan base that absolutely adores Nimona. Please, please, we are begging Netflix. And my number 1 pick, the top of my 4K wish list, you might have guessed, is Call Me By Your Name from Luca Guadagnino. Now, I know this is a little bit of a caveat with this, because I do believe, like, Canada has some 4K release, and I saw that it has a 4K release, but you have to buy this Sony Pictures Classics, like, 30 movie book, like this big anniversary box set that they released for over $100. No, 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 no. I need it just like this. Standalone US release for the 4K. Do you hear me? Now, part of me can understand why you'd feel the need not to, that you don't think it really needs a 4K upgrade, because it already looks absolutely stunning, even right here on this Blu-ray. But that's all the more reason to give it the restoration. This film is cinematography gold. I mean, come on, this is honestly one of the most gorgeously shot movies I think I've ever seen. Sayambo and Luca put their everything into this movie here. Obviously, I just adore the film. I love the film. Problematic business and all. It's kind of cemented itself as one of those modern day classics that I think would do well on 4K if you re-released Call Me By Your Name. I think people would buy it. I think people would go for it, even with those problematic aspects that have been swirling. But just for the art form of film, come on. A movie this stunning deserves that 4K release. And on its own, not in a very expensive box set where I have to buy a bunch of other movies. No, thank you. So once again, thank you so much, Chad, for inviting me on to talk about 4K releases. And I look forward to seeing, do we have any crossover or are they all different? I'm so excited to hear your list.
All right, guys, now we get into the nitty gritty. Top 5. So my number 5, we have Network. This is a 1976 film, won a slew of Oscars, and was even nominated for Best Picture, and it was shot on 16mm and 35mm. Now, this does have a DVD and Blu-ray release. By all means, that's awesome. But watching this film recently, I got the DVD out from my local library, and when I was watching it, I was like, this is a film that would benefit greatly from a 4K release, which is why, after watching it on DVD and was saying to myself, this is a great film, I want to own it, I decided not to buy the Blu-ray and decided to say, you know what? I'm going to wait for the 4K release. So I think this will happen because it does turn 50 pretty soon from what I understand. So I think that Warner Bros. Will look and say, you know what? Turns 50, let's give the people a 4K release. So fingers crossed that will happen because, again, this is a great film that, again, very, very timely. To this day, it's aged quite well. It's a great film. Highly recommend it. And, yeah, fingers crossed for a 4K release. So that's my number 5. Next up, my number 4. Similar to Challengers, this is a more recent film. My number 4, we have Poor Things. This film came out in 2023. It was shot on 35mm and is a 4K master format. So this is one of those things that's also kind of baffling. This film wasn't just a box office success. It also won a bunch of Oscars. And for crying out loud, like, it's a film that looks incredible. Like, it looks outstanding. So it has all the ingredients to a 4K release, but because it is a, from what I understand, it's a Searchlight Pictures film, which, you know, got bought up by Disney. So Disney, again, I know I'm a broken record at this point, but Disney really isn't about physical media. So they released a bare bones Blu-ray release. And knowing that this film has a 4K scan out there, I can't really in good conscience pick up the Blu-ray. Like, I'm just like, yeah, no. I'm hoping that this does get a 4K release down the line. It deserves it. I mean, it is a gorgeous film. I saw this in theaters, and it was just an exquisite experience. So, fingers crossed. Hoping this gets a 4K release, as it should. And, yeah, that's why it's my number 4. Next up, my number 3, we have a film that some of you might be surprised I have this on my list, but I'll explain. My number 3 is Annie Hall. This is a 1977 film. Won Best Picture at the Oscars, shot on 35mm, and this is a film that I rewatched recently, and I loved it. It is definitely one of my favorite romantic comedies, for sure, and I think it looks great. Like, watching it on Prime Video, which, you know, it has, like, the filmmaker mode, I was like, this is one of those films that I feel like, knowing that it's not on 4K is something that's like, huh? Because I think that, and I mean this, I feel like HDR would really benefit on a 4K disc. Like, this is the type of film that would look very, very good. It's not like some romantic comedies where it's, like, not that good looking in terms of cinematography. No, this is a film that has really, really good cinematography. It looks really good, and I think it could look even better on 4K. So, I think this will happen. Not necessarily anytime soon, but I think that down the line, people will look and say, you know what? Yeah, this was a huge box office success. Won a bunch of Oscars, including Best Picture, so let's make this happen. So, hoping that does, and twice my number 3. Next up, my number 2, we have Theconformist. This is a 1970 film shot on 35mm, and I'm not going to lie to you guys. I saw, this was months and months ago, I saw that Theconformist had a 4K release, 4K scan, I should say, and the 4K scan was put onto a Blu-ray. So I was like, you know what? I don't know if this is going to get a 4K release. So you know what? I might actually pick up the Blu-ray that has a 4K scan of it. However, I looked up the review, and it had like a 2 out of 5 on Blu-ray.com, and it said that it was abysmal. Not that it was the transfer itself, but just how they handled it on the Blu-ray disc. So I'm hoping, knowing that there is actually a 4K scan of this film, I'm hoping that they actually utilize that and put it onto a 4K disc and don't butcher it, because it is a great film. I saw this about a year or so ago, and it was like, holy cow, this film is great. I see why it's considered a classic. And I think that what better way to experience this film than on 4K? So hoping that happens, really, really hoping, because again, hearing that the Blu-ray was butchered that way, it's really sad. But yeah, Conformist is my number 2. Next up, my number 1. This is a film that I'm really hoping that we get a 4K release for this. I think that similar to Network, it turns 50 the same year as Network, so I'm hoping that it also will get a 4K release. But without further ado, my number 1, the one that I'm really, really hoping gets a 4K UHD release in North America, we have All the President's Men. This is a film that came out in 1976, won a bunch of Oscars, was nominated for several others, stars Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford. I know what you're probably thinking. Wait a minute, that film, it looks so gritty looking. It looks so, It's a film that is gritty looking, yes, but that's the aesthetic. It's a film that I'm not saying will look like Poor Things with a 4K scan. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that given how gritty that film looks, I think that it could have a really good 4K scan done to it that will still uphold those, gritty details that the film inherently has, whilst at the same time giving it a healthy release. Because from what I've read, the Blu-ray that came out a decade plus ago really isn't that good. And again, this is one of my favorite films of all time. So even though I would just be happy to own it, I think that a film of this caliber deserves the best of the best. And that's why I'm like sitting beside myself saying, this film is incredible. Why not give it a 4K release? Again, it's shot on 35mm, so they could give this a 4K scan. I know it can happen. But the question is, will they? I don't know. I think that the 50-year anniversary is right around the corner, so maybe the next couple of years this will happen. So hoping that does, because again, I love this film. I think it's a masterpiece, and yeah, that's why it's my number 1. But you guys, those are my top 10 movies I want to see on 4K UHD in North America. Once again, Larry, aka Chillyboy, thank you very much for joining me on my channel. I really liked your choices, and let me just say this: The Aviator, in particular, that was a film that was very close to making my list. It was an honorable mention, that my top 10 honorable mentions, but you will see that probably in my another top 10 movies I want to see on 4K UHD. So stay tuned for that down the line. But yeah. Be sure to subscribe to Larry's channel, as well as his Letterboxd. I'll put those links down below. And again, let me know your top 10 movies that you want to see on 4K UHD down below. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me on Patreon, Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.